For more original stories, subscribe to Audio Tales. Now, let's begin this one. The shrill, insistent wail of sirens ripped through the otherwise tranquil Tuesday morning, a discordant soundtrack to the unraveling of Liam Henderson's carefully constructed life. He stood, coffee cup still warm in his hand, in the middle of their sun-drenched living room, watching through the bay window as two police cruisers screeched to a halt at their curb. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a confusing premonition of dread coiling in his stomach. Beside him, Sarah, his wife of 5 years, was a statue of trembling fear, her eyes wide, fixed on the uniformed officers now striding purposefully up their garden path. "Sarah, what's going on?" Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper. He reached for her, a gesture of comfort, but she flinched, recoiling as if his touch were a live wire. The movement, so unlike her, sent a shiver of unease down his spine. Before she could answer, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the house. Sarah's breath hitched, a small, choked sound. She wouldn't meet his gaze. Instead, her eyes darted towards the door, then back to the officers visible through the sheer curtains. "Stay behind me," Liam murmured, though a cold sense of foreboding was already seeping into his bones. He opened the door to find two stern-faced officers, a man and a woman, their expressions unreadable. "Mr. Liam Henderson?" Officer Davies, the male officer, asked, his voice polite but firm. "Yes, that's me. Is there a problem, officers?" Liam tried to keep his tone even, betraying none of the anxiety churning within him. "Sir, we've received a distress call from this residence. Your wife, Mrs. Sarah Henderson, has reported that she feels unsafe. She's accused you of threatening behavior, sir. She claims you're dangerous." The words hit Liam like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. Dangerous? Him? He glanced back at Sarah, who stood pale and shivering, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes, when they finally met his, were filled with a terror he didn't understand, a terror that seemed directed squarely at him. It was a performance, he'd later realize, but in that moment, it felt chillingly real. Dangerous? Liam repeated, his voice incredulous. "Sarah? What is this? Tell them. Tell them it's a mistake." Sarah just shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her ashen cheek. "I can't, Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm scared. He hasn't been himself." "Hasn't been himself?" Liam felt a hysterical laugh bubble up. He was always himself. Calm, predictable, perhaps even a little boring. He was an accountant, for crying out loud. His life revolved around spreadsheets and quiet evenings with Sarah. "Officers, I assure you, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I would never, ever hurt my wife. We were just having coffee." He gestured vaguely towards the kitchen, his mind struggling to reconcile the scene unfolding with the mundane reality of moments before. Officer Ramirez, the female officer, spoke softly, but with an undercurrent of steel. "Mr. Henderson, we need you to come with us. We just need to ask you some questions downtown. Mrs. Henderson has requested an emergency protection order." An emergency protection order. The phrase echoed in the sudden silence, each word a nail in the coffin of his ordinary life. Liam looked from the officers' implacable faces to Sarah's carefully constructed facade of fear. The accusation was absurd, a grotesque distortion of their life together. He felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by a profound sense of bewilderment and betrayal. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act, a targeted demolition. But why? Sarah, please, he pleaded, his voice hoarse. Why are you doing this? She just looked away, offering no explanation, only the damning silence of a victim. The neighbors were starting to peer from their windows, their curious gazes adding another layer to his humiliation. He could already feel their judgment, the whispers that would inevitably follow. Liam Henderson, the quiet accountant, the one they thought they knew, accused of being dangerous by his own wife. The injustice of it was a raw, gaping wound. Heat allowed himself to be led away, a numb resignation settling over him. As he was escorted to the cruiser, he caught one last glimpse of Sarah, still standing in the doorway, watching him go. Was that a flicker of something else in her eyes, beneath? The fear, regret, or something colder? He couldn't tell. The only certainty was that his life, as he knew it, had just been irrevocably shattered by an accusation he couldn't comprehend, from the person he thought he knew best. The first act of his nightmare had begun. The cold, sterile environment of the police station did little to soothe Liam's frayed nerves. He sat in a small interrogation room, the metallic tang of fear and stale coffee heavy in the air. He'd been read his rights, a surreal experience that made him feel like a character in a cheap crime drama. The initial shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a gnawing anxiety and a desperate need for answers. Why was Sarah doing this? What could possibly motivate such a devastating lie? He replayed their recent weeks together in his mind, searching for any clue, any argument or unusual incident that could have been twisted into this monstrous accusation. There was nothing. Their life was normal. They'd had dinner with friends the previous Saturday. They'd been planning a weekend trip to the coast. He'd bought her flowers just last week, for no reason other than he loved her. Or thought he did. Now, that love felt like a naive delusion. Detective Miller, a man with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, entered the room. He didn't offer any pleasantries, just sat down and opened a folder. "Mr. Henderson," he began, his voice flat. "Your wife alleges a pattern of intimidating behavior, culminating in a specific threat made this morning. She says you told her that if she ever thought of leaving you, she'd regret it, and that you'd make sure she had nothing." Liam stared at him, dumbfounded. That's a complete fabrication. I never said anything like that. Ever. We weren't even arguing this morning. We were talking about what to have for dinner tonight. The sheer audacity of the lie was breathtaking. Sarah knew him. She knew he wasn't capable of such threats. "So she's lying?" Miller asked, his gaze unwavering. "Yes," emphatically. "Yes!" Liam leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "I don't know why she's saying these things. Maybe she's unwell? Stressed? Is there someone influencing her?" Miller just made a note. "She seemed quite coherent. To us, Mr. Henderson. And very frightened." The hours crawled by. Liam answered questions, reiterated his denial, and pleaded his confusion. He was eventually released, but not before being served with a temporary restraining order. He couldn't go home. He couldn't contact Sarah. He was, for all intents and purposes, an outcast. The accusation, though not yet proven, had already branded him. He called his sister, Clara, his voice cracking as he relayed the unbelievable events. Clara, ever the pragmatist, was shocked but supportive. She arranged for him to stay in her spare room and, more importantly, started looking for a lawyer. The next few days were a blur of despair and frantic attempts to understand. He was placed on administrative leave from his accounting firm, the Mal carefully worded email from HR doing little to hide the underlying suspicion. Friends he'd known for years became distant, their calls less frequent, their voices tinged with an uncomfortable caution. He saw the news reports online. Brief, factual, but damning. Local accountant accused of domestic threats. His picture, a slightly outdated one from his company's website, accompanied the articles. His first meeting with Anya Sharma, the lawyer Clara had found, offered a small sliver of hope in the suffocating darkness. Ms. Sharma was a petite woman, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of quiet determination. She listened to Liam's story patiently, without judgment, her gaze analytical. False accusations, especially in domestic situations, are incredibly damaging, Mr. Henderson, she said, her voice calm and measured. The immediate presumption is often with the accuser. Our job will be to dismantle that presumption by finding the truth. But how? Liam asked, his voice heavy with desperation. It's her word against mine. She's my wife. People will believe her. People believe what seems plausible, Anya corrected gently. Right now, her story, however false, has been presented as plausible. We need to find out why she's telling this story. What does she gain? Or, perhaps more importantly, what is she trying to avoid? Anya began her work immediately. She advised Liam to make a detailed timeline of the weeks leading up to the accusation, noting any unusual behavior from Sarah, any arguments, any new acquaintances, any financial changes. Anything that deviated from their routine. Liam racked his brain. Sarah had seemed a little more stressed than usual lately, he recalled, more secretive with her phone. There had been a few hushed calls she'd ended abruptly when he entered the room. At the time, he'd dismissed it as work pressure or planning, a surprise for him. Now, those moments took on a sinister new light. He also remembered her being unusually interested in their joint finances a few weeks prior, asking questions about their savings and investments that seemed out of character for her usually hands-off approach. Meanwhile, Sarah was doubling down on her narrative. She gave a tearful interview to a local news blog, painting herself as a terrified victim who had finally found the courage to speak out. She spoke of Liam's controlling nature, his short temper, all qualities Liam and anyone who truly knew him would attest he simply didn't possess. The public sympathy for her grew, while Liam's isolation deepened. The tension was a constant, crushing weight. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The image of Sarah's accusatory, fearful face haunted him. The injustice of it all burned in his gut. He was trapped in a nightmare orchestrated by the woman he had promised to love and cherish. The police investigation seemed to be moving slowly, but inexorably, towards formal charges. The initial hearing for the permanent protection order was scheduled. Liam felt like he was drowning, the surface further away with each passing day. Anya, however, remained a beacon of methodical resolve. "We need to look into Sarah's life more closely, Liam," she said during one of their strategy sessions. "Not just her interactions with you, but her entire sphere. Credit card statements, phone records, social media, friends, work colleagues. If there's a reason for this lie, it's hidden somewhere in her world." Liam reluctantly agreed to provide access to their joint accounts and any other information Anya needed. It felt like a violation of the privacy they once shared, but he knew it was necessary. He had to fight. He had to uncover why his life was being systematically destroyed. He was beginning to realize that Sarah's accusation wasn't just an ihabitao act of malice. It was an act of desperation. But desperate about what? The answer, he felt, was lurking just out of sight. A shadowy truth that held the key to his salvation or his complete ruin. The second act was drawing him deeper into the abyss. But with Anya's help, he clung to the hope that a path to the truth, however narrow, might still exist. Anya Sharma was nothing if not meticulous. She began to sift through the minutiae of Sarah and Liam's shared life, and then, more specifically, into Sarah's individual activities. The joint bank accounts showed nothing overly suspicious at first glance, just the usual ebb and flow of a married couple's finances. But then Anya requested Sarah's personal credit card statements and phone records through legal channels, a move predicated on the need to establish Sarah's state of mind and potential motives. Liam, meanwhile, continued his agonizing mental inventory. He remembered Sarah mentioning a new friend from a yoga class she'd recently joined, a man named Marcus. She'd been vague about him, describing him as intense, but charismatic. Liam hadn't thought much of it at the time. Sarah had always been more social than him. Now, the name echoed with a faint, unsettling resonance. The first crack in Sarah's carefully constructed facade appeared in her phone records. There were dozens of calls and texts to a number Liam didn't recognize, particularly in the weeks leading up to the accusation. The calls were often late at night, or during times Sarah claimed to be at her part-time job at a local art gallery. Anya ran the number. It was registered to a Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne, Anya said, her brow furrowed as she looked at the preliminary background check she'd pulled. He has a bit of a checkered past, some minor fraud charges a few years ago, never convicted. Rumored connections to some unsavory business dealings, but nothing concrete. Lives rather well for someone with no visible means of significant income. A cold dread began to spread through Liam. Marcus, the intense friend from yoga. Could this be him? The next piece fell into place when Sarah's personal credit card statements arrived. There were several large cash withdrawals from ATMs near a part of town Sarah rarely frequented, and a series of expensive purchases, designer clothes, high-end electronics, that didn't match her usual spending habits and certainly hadn't appeared in their home. More damningly, there were payments to a luxury car rental agency. Sarah didn't drive a luxury car. Liam drove their sensible sedan. She's funding a lifestyle, Liam, Anya stated, her voice grim. Or someone else's. The picture was becoming clearer, uglier. Anya's investigator managed to get a discreet photo of Marcus Thorne. When Anya showed it to Liam, his blood ran cold. He'd seen him once, very briefly. Sarah had been on a video call a few weeks back, and when Liam had walked into the room, she'd hastily ended it. But not before Liam caught a glimpse of the man on the other end of the call. It was Marcus Thorne. Sarah had brushed it off, saying it was a colleague from a freelance project. The defense team started to focus intensely on Marcus. Who was he? What was his relationship with Sarah? Why all the secrecy? Anya theorized that Sarah was involved with Thorne, perhaps financially entangled or romantically, or both. The pressure on Liam was immense. The court date for the permanent restraining order loomed. If granted, it would solidify his status as a pariah and lend further credence to Sarah's claims in any subsequent criminal proceedings. He felt like he was racing against a ticking clock, the truth buried under layers of deceit. Anya decided they needed more than just financial records and call logs. They needed to understand the nature of Sarah's relationship with Marcus, and, critically, if Marcus was exerting some kind of influence over her that could explain her drastic actions. She hired a private investigator, a discreet professional named Ray, to observe Sarah and Marcus. Ray's initial reports were illuminating. Sarah was meeting Marcus Thorne regularly, often at secluded cafes or parks. Their interactions, as observed from a distance, were not those of casual friends. There was an intimacy, but also, Ray noted, a visible tension in Sarah. She often looked stressed, anxious, even fearful in Thorne's presence. Thorne, on the other hand, appeared confident, controlling, often doing most of the talking, sometimes gesturing emphatically, even aggressively. One afternoon, Ray captured something crucial. He'd been observing Marcus Thorne's rather opulent apartment building, far grander than anything Sarah and Liam could afford. He saw Marcus and Sarah arrive together. Later, he saw them on the balcony. They were arguing. Sarah looked distraught. Marcus grabbed her arm, his face contorted in anger. Sarah pulled away, clearly upset. And then Marcus seemed to soften, pulling her into an embrace that looked more like an act of possession than affection. Ray managed to get a few long-distance photographs and a grainy video clip. When Anya showed Liam the photos, a wave of nausea hit him. It wasn't just the confirmation of an affair. It was the visible fear in Sarah's eyes when Marcus gripped her arm. This wasn't the confident, manipulative woman who had coolly accused him. This was someone trapped, someone afraid. Liam, Anya said gently, I think Sarah is involved with a dangerous man. And I think her accusation against you might not have been primarily about hurting you, but about protecting him or herself from him in some twisted way. The theory began to form. Marcus Thorne was likely involved in something illegal, something significant. Sarah had become entangled with him. Perhaps Liam, with his methodical nature and access to their joint finances, was getting too close, too, discovering something. Or perhaps Marcus, paranoid and controlling, perceived Liam as a threat, a loose end, a potential witness, or simply an inconvenience. The title of your story, Anya mused, tapping the file. My wife accused me of being dangerous. But the one she was really afraid would find out. Everything was someone else. What if the someone else she was afraid would find out was Marcus? Afraid he'd find out she was wavering? Or that you were getting close to his secrets? Or what if she was afraid we, the authorities, or even you, would find out about Marcus? Anya then cross-referenced Marcus Thorne's known associates with ongoing financial crime investigations. A hit. Thorne's name had surfaced on the periphery of a major embezzlement case involving a string of shell corporations. He wasn't a prime suspect yet, but he was a person of interest. This is it, Liam, Anya said, her eyes alight with a fierce energy. Marcus Thorne is likely a serious criminal. Sarah is involved with him, willingly or not. She needed you out of the way. Discredited. If you stumbled upon Thorne's activities, and you were seen as unstable, dangerous, no one would believe you. The accusation against you was a smokescreen, a desperate, dangerous gambit. The truth, when it began to fully materialize, was more complex and far more sinister than Liam could have imagined. Sarah hadn't just betrayed him with another man. She had potentially sacrificed him to protect a criminal, or to protect herself from that criminal's wrath. The hidden proof was accumulating. The financial drain, the secret meetings, Thorne's criminal background, and his controlling, intimidating behavior towards Sarah. Anya decided on a bold move for the restraining order hearing. She wouldn't just defend Liam. She would expose Sarah's secret life and the man who was pulling the strings. They had Ray's photographs, the financial records, the phone logs. They also had a new piece of information. Liam remembered that Sarah had been meticulously shredding documents from her home office desk in the days before the accusation, something she never did. He'd thought it was just spring cleaning. Now it screamed of destroying evidence. Anya suspected those documents might have linked directly to Thorne's illicit businesses, and Sarah was terrified of what Liam, the accountant, might inadvertently discover if he saw them. The day of the hearing arrived. Liam felt a knot of dread and a flicker of hope. Sarah was already there, seated with her lawyer, looking pale and composed, the picture of a wronged wife. The courtroom was quiet, charged with anticipation. Sarah's lawyer presented her case, reiterating the claims of threats and intimidation. Sarah testified, her voice trembling convincingly as she recounted Liam's alleged dangerous behavior. Liam watched her, no longer with anger, but with a profound sense of sorrow. He saw the fear in her, but now he understood it wasn't fear of him. Then it was Anya Sharma's turn. "Mrs. Henderson," Anya began, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority. "You've painted a picture of your husband as a dangerous man. But I suggest the danger in your life doesn't come from Liam Henderson at all. I suggest it comes from a Mr. Marcus Thorne." A visible shock ran through Sarah. Her composure wavered, her eyes darting nervously towards her lawyer, then back to Anya. The color drained from her face. Anya methodically laid out the evidence. The phone records, the credit card statements showing unexplained expenses and cash withdrawals, Ray's photographs of Sarah and Marcus, the image of Marcus grabbing Sarah's arm. She presented the background check on Thorne, his connection to financial crime investigations. "Mrs. Henderson," Anya pressed, "isn't it true that you are involved in an intimate relationship with Marcus Thorne? Isn't it true that he is a controlling and potentially dangerous individual? And isn't it true that you accused your husband, a man with no history of violence, of being dangerous, not because you feared him, but because you feared Marcus Thorne, or feared what your husband might uncover about Marcus Thorne's illegal activities?" Sarah stammered, denied, but her denials were weak, her eyes filled with panic. The carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. Then came the surprise appearance Anya had orchestrated. She called a new witness, not to the stand, initially, but whose presence was announced. "Your Honor, the prosecution in the ongoing embezzlement case concerning Thorne and Associates has expressed keen interest in Mrs. Henderson's potential knowledge of Marcus Thorne's financial dealings. Detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit are present in this courtroom today." Two plainclothes detectives, who had been sitting quietly at the back, rose slightly. Their presence was a silent, powerful confirmation of Thorne's criminality and the seriousness of the situation. Sarah looked like a cornered animal. The carefully maintained dam of her lies finally burst. Tears streamed down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of fear and desperation, not of feigned victimhood. "He made me," she choked out, her voice barely audible. "Marcus. He said Liam was getting too curious. Liam handles all our finances. He's so meticulous. Marcus was afraid Liam would see things, transactions. He said if Liam found out about his business or about us, he would destroy everything. He threatened me. He said I had to get Liam out of the house, make him look unreliable, or he'd harm me. Or worse, he'd make it look like Liam was involved in his schemes." The courtroom was stunned into silence. The plot twist hung in the air, heavy and shocking. Sarah wasn't the primary victimizer. She was, in many ways, another victim of Marcus Thorne, albeit one who had made a terrible, destructive choice to victimize Liam in turn. The true villain was Marcus Thorne, the puppet master pulling Sarah's strings. She was terrified that Liam, with his accountant's eye for detail, would stumble upon the illicit money flowing through accounts she had been coerced into helping manage or conceal. The accusation wasn't to protect her from Liam, but to protect Thorne's secrets from Liam and, by extension, from the authorities. The judge dismissed the restraining order against Liam immediately. The revelation of Sarah's coerced false accusation and Marcus Thorne's criminal activities shifted the entire landscape. Outside the courtroom, the detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit were waiting. Sarah, now cooperating, began to tell them everything she knew about Marcus Thorne, his embezzlement schemes, and the threats he'd made against her. Marcus Thorne was arrested later that day, caught completely off guard as he tried to empty accounts and flee. The evidence Sarah provided, corroborated by Anya's findings and the ongoing police investigation, was overwhelming. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, extortion, and making terroristic threats. The conclusion was a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Marcus Thorne, facing a mountain of evidence, eventually pleaded guilty to several charges and received a lengthy prison sentence. Sarah, for her part, faced consequences for the false accusation against Liam and her complicity, however coerced, in Thorne's activities. She received a suspended sentence and mandatory counseling. Her life in ruins, her reputation shattered. The court acknowledged the duress she had been under, but also the severe harm she had inflicted on an innocent man. Liam was, of course, fully exonerated. His name was cleared, his job offered back to him with a sincere apology from his firm. But the scars remained. The betrayal by Sarah, the woman he had loved and trusted, cut deeper than any public accusation. His world had been turned upside down, his faith in human nature profoundly shaken. He moved out of the home he had shared with Sarah, unable to erase the memories of her deception. He started rebuilding his life, piece by piece. Clara and Anya, Sharma remained his steadfast supporters. He found a new apartment, focused on his work, and slowly began to reconnect with the friends who had stood by him or who now offered shamefaced apologies. The moral of the story was a stark one. Lies, born of fear and desperation, have devastating and far-reaching consequences. Things are rarely as they seem on the surface, and the truth, however deeply buried, often has a way of clawing itself into the light. Justice, in this case, was served, not as a clean, satisfying victory, but as a messy, painful untangling of deceit. Liam Henderson had been to hell and back, accused of being a danger by the woman he loved, only to discover she was the one ensnared by a far greater menace. He was free, but he would forever carry the knowledge of how quickly a life could be shattered, and how meticulously it had to be pieced back together. He learned that true strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the courage to seek truth even in the darkest of times. His quiet, orderly life was gone, but in its place was a resilience he never knew he possessed, and a cautious wisdom that would guide his steps forward. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe. It truly helps the channel. Click the video on screen, and I'll see you there.